Love makes me treat you the way that I do. Gee, baby, ain't I good to you? There's nothing too good for a girl that's so true. Gee, baby, ain't I good to you? I bought you a fur coat for Christmas, a diamond ring.
Greetings, everyone. Dr. H here finally. I do apologize for the lateness of this vid. I've had a plethora of issues, both with family and also then with technical issues. So looks like I've got the tech issues worked out. Okay, so essentially what I want to talk to you about and what I had planned to talk to you about was at the last Monday, or this past Monday, was the keyboard and the staff. Now, the keyboard, we're going to have to wait until class to really delve into it more. I can give you some things tonight at this lecture, but I can't really demonstrate fully without us being there with the keyboards. Although I encourage you to use the keyboard feature on your online text. You find it down here in the lower corner. You can pull that up at any time, and again, you can play. So I would encourage you to do that throughout this lecture, just so you can have a frame of reference. Now, your book has an introduction, and it's really nice. It gives you a good description, but it's not the end-all be-all, and it isn't very clear. So I'm hopeful that I can maybe clarify a few things for us with respect to the staff and its construction. Now, first of all, when we talk about the music staff, we're talking about, of course, the 5 lines and the 4 spaces. Now, in this introduction, it does talk about that, but take a look here, go a little bit down to the real meat of the discussion where it says the staff. The staff consists of 5 parallel horizontal lines and the 4 spaces between them. Musical notes are written on the staff representing different pitches. The note head is the oval-shaped part of a musical note. Note heads can be placed either on the lines or on the spaces. Now, I'm not going to spend a great deal of time on this because I think it's fairly self-explanatory, but I wanted you to be aware, anytime you see this show me, click on it and it shows you, look, there it's putting notes on the spaces, on the lines. It's showing you where the note heads go, okay? It's just a demonstration, nothing to be afraid of. But notice it says some note heads are filled in, some are not, and some note heads have stems, some have flags attached to them. This is stuff that we're going to get into later. That has to do with a aspect of music notation called rhythm, and we're going to get to that, I promise you. For now, let's just use that oval that is turned on its side, okay? I think that's going to be the best way for us to go. All right, so not to detract anything from your textbook, but here is another way of looking at the online, the material that you have on your online text. For example, we're talking about the components of the staff, okay? That being the cymbals, the treble clef, the bass clef. Your book talks about the C clef. We're going to talk about that later. Don't worry about that right now. But obviously the lines and spaces, the ledger lines, all of these things are part of the musical staff. So let's take a look at it. Just again, this is just review, another way of taking a look at it. They talk about the 5 lines and 4 spaces. Well, let's get 5 lines and 4 spaces up here so that we can take a look at it. Now, all music is designed this way, okay? All music has, all written music utilizes some type of notation system. The standard now is the 5-line, 4-space system. We have clef symbols that designate for us pitch ranges and pitch registers. think about it this way: higher pitches and lower pitches, right? Higher pitches are going to use a certain notation, a certain symbol to denote their range, and other pitches, the lower pitches, are going to use another symbol. Well, in this case, the higher pitches use something called the treble clef. Okay, so that treble clef there is telling you, the musician, you, the performer, that the pitches you're reading are going to be of a higher register, in the higher ranges. Now, the lines and the spaces have letter names associated with them, just like your textbook talks about. Here it is displayed in just a little bit of a different way. The spaces spell the word face, F-A-C-E. So that space, that bottom space, is an F. Next space up is an A. Next space up is a C. Next space up is an E. Then the lines, E, G, B, D, and F. Okay, something that you're going to want to notice here is the correlation between the lines and the spaces. For example, we can go from E to F to G to A to B to C. It's alphabetical, right? And bear in mind, the musical alphabet starts on A and it goes to G and then it starts over, okay? Now, I haven't mentioned anything yet about octave designation or the bass clef or ledger lines. Believe me, all of that is coming up, but let's understand something. The treble clef spaces spell the word face. If you can remember that, you can get the rest of the lines, right? Because it's alphabetical. The treble clef lines, they spell every good boy, or not spell, but the acronym for that is every good boy does fine. Okay, so now let's take a look at the bass clef. Okay, we're going to have those same 5 lines and 4 spaces, but this time we're going to be using a different symbol called the bass clef. The bass clef comes in, and now that changes everything. That changes the lines, the names of the lines and the spaces. The spaces now are A, C, E, and G, and the lines are G, B, D, F, and A. Now, obviously, neither of these spell a word, but you guessed it, there's acronyms for these as well. For the spaces, all cars eat gas. For the lines, good boys do fine always, or my favorite, good burritos don't fall apart. So all cars eat gas, good boys do fine always, good burritos don't fall apart. It doesn't matter to me which one you use, but it's going to be beneficial to you to memorize these as quickly as possible so that you aren't spending a lot of time searching and trying to find the notes. Okay, so this is just a basic description of what the 2 clefs, treble and bass, are, how they're constructed, and the names of the lines and the spaces for each. Now let's take a look at something else. In music, we've got a treble clef up here. In order to denote pitches, we use something called a note head, just like our textbook said. A note head is generally just an oval turned on its side. Sometimes you'll see the oval slanted. It's not a big deal, folks, if you can't make it perfect, okay? But if you need to make an oval to make a note head. All right. So the note head simply just tells us where pitches are. If we want to indicate a specific pitch, we use a note head to do it. For example, when we look at the lines and the spaces of the treble clef, right? E, G, B, D, and F for the lines, F, A, C, E, or face for the spaces. Well, suppose we want to denote one of those pitches. Let's say an F. Well, we throw a note up there in that bottom space. That is telling you, the performer, that the note being represented there, the pitch, is an F, okay? All right. Now, we could go on and put other notes up here, but I think you would grasp the idea in doing this. Let's talk just a little bit more about one more component. Now here, this is showing you the lines and spaces, but they're not there. It's showing you the pitches, the pitch names for the lines and spaces in both the treble and bass clefs. Okay? Think about that. There's all the lines and space names for the treble and bass clef. The treble up here, the bass down here. And that's generally how music is organized, okay? Upper pitches are going to be on the top, lower pitches on the bottom. And if you want to relate this to the piano keyboard pitch ranges, the left is low, the right is high. So looking at the piano keyboard, left to right, right? Low to high. But on the musical staff, low to high is from down to up, as it would be. We would think low, right, on the bottom, high on the top. Okay, so then if we add these lines and spaces back in, we see where all the pitches are, and we see two clefs, essentially, the treble clef and the bass clef. So there they are, just displayed together. Their pitches, their letter names, and we're using note heads to indicate each of these. What we're looking at here is taking the treble clef and the bass clef, and we're joining the two together on the left by a bracket or a brace. So you see that little symbol there. Putting all of this together, right? That bracket on the left, treble and bass clef together, is known as the grand staff. So we're going to be looking at the grand staff, especially with respect to ledger lines, okay? And this is going to have a significant meaning for us when we start to look at something called octave designation. Okay, so now let's go back to our text and talk about what we can do with this show me button. You know, when you say things like show me again, look at, you have some choices over here. You can ask it to show you only the notes on the lines or only the notes on the spaces, or you can have it show all of them for you, okay? It's just showing you how they're spaced, how they're placed on the staff. That's all you need to know. Okay, so let's move ahead. We can talk more about the note placement on the staff. You can see here the 4 lines, or excuse me, the 5 lines and the 4 spaces. This is just what we talked about a moment ago. Now, the reason for this demonstration is to show you that starting on the bottom, remember, low all the way up to high. Now, I'm going to bring the keyboard up here to demonstrate something for you. So we said on the staff, low to high is from the bottom to the top, right? So when you look at the keyboard, however, low to high is left to right. I mean, obviously, if you move from your left to the right on the piano keyboard, you're going to go from the low pitches to the high pitches. But on the musical staff, you have bottom to top. Okay, so just be aware that that is something that you can do. And something you should be aware of. Now, we get into something called ledger lines. Ledger lines are merely an extension of the 5 lines and the 4 spaces. If you think about it, it makes sense. Can you imagine being limited only to the treble clef or the bass clef? Obviously, that doesn't give you a lot of, pitches to work with. And when you consider the size of the piano keyboard, it has 88 keys, that wouldn't really make sense to only have that few pitches available to you. So we can go above the stave, or we can go below the stave. And by the way, stave, staff, those are 2 words that are used interchangeably. But take a look at this. If we watch the topmost F here, which I'm just giving you a demonstration. The topmost F, way up high here, is this F right here. And notice how it has an octave designation. If you hover over the key, look at it says F5. Now this is going to become more significant to you momentarily, but just trust me, you're dealing with octaves on the keyboard. Now what is an octave? Okay, let's talk about that for a second. Octave simply means 8. Now if you start on the bottom left of the keyboard, right, this lowest note, and you go up to the next A, that's 8 tones. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That gives you an octave. And also take a look at the organization of the keyboard. Notice how you have 3 black keys, followed by 2 black keys, followed by 3. The pattern is essential for you to understand that before every 2 black keys is a C. So that's a C, that's a C, that's a C, and that's a C. Well, guess what? All of these are octave designations. So if we were to say this C, this is going to be, look at the window, C1. This next C up would be C2, and then C3, and then C4. C4 would be middle C, okay? So how does this relate to the staff? We're going to get there when we start to talk about ledger lines, but I wanted you to be aware. Now you can listen to these little musical excerpts if you want to. They just give you demonstrations of, you know, notes that are written above the staff, notes that are written below the staff. You know, we're going to talk more about this in class, but you know, do use these show me tools, okay? They are very, very helpful. Okay, so when we talk about notation practice, notating pitches, it says here that it's important to be able to write music notation that is clear and legible. Music that is poorly notated is hard for musicians to read and perform. In this lesson, you will practice writing note heads, stems, and accidentals on the staff. I'm going to let you do that in class, okay? I'm going to print off some worksheets. We're going to practice doing it in class, so don't worry about it. But if you do click on the show me, notice how it's showing you what the notes look like, how we place them, where we place them, and then incorrect. I am not going to mark you down if you can't get the note head exactly the way it's supposed to be, okay? Please, please don't stress over something like that, okay? As long as you can make it clear what it is that you're indicating, you know. Stems is another factor that we're going to go over in class. There is a rule as to how the stems are supposed to be written. You'll notice here that it has to do with the middle line being the breaking point, okay? Notes that are written above this middle line, the stem has to point down. Notes that are written below the middle line, the stem has to point up. But please, please bear in mind, music is not an exact science. There are exceptions to every rule, which is one of the reasons why music can be so confusing. So we're going to talk again more about this, but you know, this is the general rule that that you should follow. And then here's another example of how things go, and this is showing you how accidentals are placed on the music staff, and we're going to talk more about accidentals as we go along. I'm not sure why the flat one is broken. I'll have to, oh, there it goes. So it's just showing you again how a sharp is indicated. Again, nothing that you really need to stress over. You might, you know, just maybe go over what sharps and flats are, what their function is, and of course we have, in addition to sharps and flats, we have naturals. Obviously they affect pitches, right? And so when we notate these things, we have to know how to notate them. Generally speaking, the naturals, the flats, the sharps, the accidentals always precede the note head. Let me say that again. They always precede the note head or go to the left of the note head. Again, we are going to practice all of this in class, so please don't stress. if it's not very clear to you right away. Okay, so let's move ahead now and talk about the clefs. And we've already, in my own little demonstration to you, we've talked about clefs, the treble clef and the bass clef. This is showing you what they are. And notice how it is showing you G4. The reason it is doing that is to show you that the treble clef, this little curly Q, if you will, right here, always kind of encircles that G, all right? Now, I'm going to pull the keyboard back up. And if I go to G4, notice same note, right? Okay? And that happens to be the second line on the musical staff. Now I'm going to give you, this is a little quiz. Think about this. If I were to go to the G below this one, right? An octave below this one. If this is G4, what would the octave below be? Think about it. G3, right? So if I go one octave below G4, there's G4. If I go one octave below, I'm playing G3. And look at your window. Okay? So, bass clef. Notice how it says F3. A moment ago I played G3 for you, right? Okay? Here is F3. If I were to play the F above F3, the octave above F3, one octave above, what would it be? F4. Okay? So, try to keep these octave images in your head. It's a little daunting at first, but not too bad. Now they're showing you two movable clefs, C clefs. One of them is the alto clef. There's something to remember. Every time you see this arrow in the alto clef, any time this clef is placed anywhere on a 5-line 4-space staff, whatever that middle arrow is pointing to is middle C. Always. Okay? That's C4, right? The C above that would be C5, okay? Note, though, when we use the tenor clef, notice how it moved up, right? That note is still middle C. It's just being indicated a different way, okay? So, I certainly don't want to confuse anyone, but the movable clefs or the C clefs are something that we do need to look at and be considerate of. Just understand that whatever that middle arrow is pointing to, whether it's a line or a space, that's going to be middle C. Okay, let's move ahead. Now we're looking at the treble clef with respect to the most commonly used clef. As I said earlier, it is used for high-pitched instruments such as the piccolo, the flute, the oboe, the clarinet. Also for voices, it's used for the soprano and the alto voices, generally speaking. So let's take a look at this. We're going to do the treble clef. Again, they're showing you where that G4 is, right? Okay. And now it's saying the treble clef is also known as the G clef, since it has its origins in a stylized version of the letter G, as illustrated on the example. Yeah, okay. I mean, honestly, folks, this isn't that big a deal. Okay, don't really worry about that. Showing you a little bit of a scale based upon the treble clef. It's showing you where those notes are. It's showing you their octave designation, but they're not giving you the number. They're just sort of telling you that these notes fall within this span, and that is, that is their sound. Okay. Isn't that lovely? So, if you want to listen to the Fantasia, great. It's just showing you that some notes are written above the staff using ledger lines, but everything is written in the treble clef. Now we have something called mnemonics. Mnemonics, from the Greek word meaning to remember, are catchy or humorous phrases used to remember a series of items. Okay, so remember I said acronym a while ago? Well, I guess it's really called mnemonic. Every good boy does fine. FACE, right? Face. Or good boys do fine always. Or good burritos don't fall apart. No problems. Just memorize them as best you can. Here is the big deal. The octave designation. Octave 3, octave 4, octave 5, and octave 6. This is what I want you to catch, okay? If we pull our keyboard up here, we're looking at octave 3, and we're looking at a G below the staff. So if we come down here to middle C, we go down below middle C, notice how the number has changed from 4 to 3. There is that G, G3. We are in the third octave of the piano, and that is G3. This would be A3. This would be B3. And then we would get from G to A to B. Now we're at middle C, or C4, because we're in the fourth octave. If we were to continue up, we would be into the fifth octave and the sixth octave, and so on. So I hope this helps you understand a little bit better about octave designation. Now let's go on a little bit. The bass clef, similar structure, right? It's the same 5 lines and 4 spaces, showing us that F again, right? Sometimes the bass clef is referred to as the F clef, like the treble clef is sometimes called the G clef. Okay, so you can look at this. This is now showing you a suite for cello by Bach. It's a great little suite if you want to listen to it. In fact, you may have heard it before. It's a very popular cello suite. Okay, and here's more mnemonics, showing you the good boys do fine always. All cows eat grass, or all cars eat gas. Again, good burritos don't fall apart. Whatever you have to do to memorize the lines and spaces of both the treble and the bass clefs. Now, take a look at this octave designation. Again, here's the meat of what we're getting at. C here is called C2 because we're in the second octave of the piano keyboard. That C2 would be right here. That's what it sounds like. If you go all the way through this octave, C2, D2, E2, F2, G2, A2, B2, and we're right here now, B2. The next one up would get us into the third octave, C3, and so forth. And then we'd go on up into the fourth octave. So take a look here. This note is middle C, C4. And that can be written in either the treble clef or the bass clef, as we have already seen. If we go back a page in our text, we can see that middle C could be written in the treble clef. In fact, right there it is, okay? So, octave designation simply is talking about the octave of the piano keyboard. Now, let's go back and take a look at that bass clef one more time. Second octave, third octave, fourth octave, all indicated here in the bass clef, but they could be indicated in the treble clef if you used enough ledger lines. So again, a ledger line is simply an extension of the musical staff. The logic would be, if you thought about, if you took a page, right, a blank page, and you wanted to indicate every single pitch available, you'd be nothing but lines and spaces all through the entire page. You wouldn't have any real octave designation. So not only does the bass clef and the treble clef give you ranges of pitches, It also kind of helps with things like octave designation. Okay, now the movable clef, the C clef, again, the thing to remember is that middle arrow, that arrow in the middle of the clef, wherever it is, it points to is middle C, always. Whether it's the alto clef, whether it's the tenor clef, either one, that is telling you that that middle arrow is pointing to middle C. It's also called the movable C clef. However you want to look at it, it doesn't really matter. You can compare the clefs here, right? Showing you where pitches are. Middle C is there. Kind of takes a little bit of time. Okay, so showing you where all those pitches are. Now it's going to bring up the bass clef, showing you where C is, D is, E, and so forth. Okay, you get the idea. Here's the the movable clef. Okay, so I hope that this is fairly self-explanatory for you. Takes a bit. Takes a while. Okay. Notice how the notes on the piano did not change, right? Only the notes on the musical staff changed based upon the clef. Okay. Now, drawing clefs takes a bit of practice, and it does. Again, this is something I'm going to let you do in class, so please don't worry about it. We will get to it, I promise you. No issues here. But let's move ahead and look just briefly at the grand staff. Nothing different than what I showed you earlier. You have a joining bar, you have a bracket that appears on the left, and a brace. And we'll show you that as soon as it gets the clefs here. But that is the grand staff. That's what it looks like, okay? Here it's showing you middle C, right? Middle C is the same note. You would not indicate it this way when you're playing an instrument or singing. That's why they're just pointing it out there. That is middle C, but it's always grouped with the clef that it's represented to. So for example, middle C in the bass clef would always appear the first ledger line above the bass staff. Middle C on the treble clef would always appear the first line below the treble clef. You can take a look and see the same thing here. You can click on these notes here, ledger lines, and it'll give you the pitches. Unfortunately, I don't know why they did this. Why they didn't give you the octave designation here is beyond me, because they really should. But, you know, again, that's something that we will practice and take a look at in class. So here's a summation, right? Here is a summation. Remember that there is a one-to-one correlation between the lines and the spaces of the staff and the keys on the keyboard. Here is the meat and potatoes of what we've been talking about. Look at this. I can go all the way down here to the second ledger line below the staff. Notice how in the window it's showing me C2. I can go up here to the first ledger line below the treble clef. Middle C. It's also the first ledger line above the bass clef. The issue here, folks, is that it is very confusing because it doesn't have that separation that was demonstrated to us momentarily before. That's something that we will talk about in class, I promise you. But understand, this is an exercise you can look at again and again and again to help you designate what pitch you're talking about. Not only the pitch, but the pitch class. Now, I'm going to give you a little bit of this pitch identification worksheet, okay? This is an exercise, So let's do it. This is saying to us, and excuse me while I put my specs on so I can see what it's actually asking us to do, but it says to drag the note B6 to the staff. Well, how are you going to do that if you don't know what B6 is, right? So let's back up. Let's find B6. There's B4, so we know it can't be that middle line. It's got to be way up here. There's C6, so I would assume that it's got to be somewhere above that, right? Well, let's check it out. Let's see. Well, now it's asking us something else. Okay, well, we'll just do what it says. It says to drag E4 to the staff. Now, here's something to remember. C4 is middle C. Once you've gotten it in your head that middle C is the first ledger line above the bass clef, right up here somewhere, well, then you're good. Take this over here. That would be middle C. D, E. Now, here's something to consider. If middle C is C4, every note above it is going to be a 4 until we get to the next C. So here we go. There we go. There is E4. We're going to try again just because it's being a butt. Come on, you. Why aren't you letting me do this? Ah, there we go. Good. Way to go. Yay. All right. Let's go to the next one. Drag D3 to the staff. Well, that was E4, so D3's got to be below there somewhere. It won't be this because we know that that's C4, so let's go down here. I bet it's that one. There you go. Okay, let's go to the next one. It says drag G3. Well, we just did D3, but now this is the treble clef. So middle C is the first ledger line below, so that G would be G4. We want G3, so it's got to be below there. So there's C, B, A, G3. Okay? Again, don't stress out over this. This is something that we will go over in class, I promise you. And again, my apologies for getting this vid out to you so late. Okay? So folks, I will see you next Monday. Do take some time to look at this, maybe once or twice, and explore and play around with your textbook. There are tools for you to help with that. Also, don't forget musictheory.net or our online course pack. All of those are tools that you can use to help you with this. And if you're still struggling, shoot me an email and we'll work out a Zoom session. Okay? Take care, folks. Have a great weekend. I will see you Monday night.
I'm a sentimental sap, that's all. What's the use of trying not to fall? I have no will, you've made your kill, 'cause you took advantage of me. I'm just like an apple on a bough, and you're gonna shake me down somehow. So what's the use? You've cooked my goose, 'cause you took advantage of